You're so welcome, and I'm often excited to present, so I'm glad to be with all of you today to be talking through this. I like to be kind of informal as I do this, so if you have a question, just pop your hand up. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out right now. Basically, just going over what we're going to actually be learning today, just understanding what a cultural shift is all about. And I want to be clear when I say cultural shift. That doesn't mean changing the culture at our institution. We're not changing our mission. But what we need to do is further understand how to live our mission with everything else that's changing around us. How do we keep that present when everything else around us is sometimes kind of in haywire? How do we keep that present as within months we'll have a new president? So what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And this is a conversation for those of us who have a year in, for those of us who have been here for about 5 minutes, for those of us who are lifers. You have bricks in the place, okay? I want to talk about it from all angles. So just a couple of ways that we're going to do this. And with everything, a little laughter and a little uncomfortable. That's how we're going to get it done, okay? I want us to remember that we're always going to be respectful. That doesn't mean we can't disagree. It's completely fine to disagree. I disagree with people all day today. But it's about the respect, okay? It's fine. I want you, like I said before, raise your hand if you have a question. I want you to remain engaged. And above all else, I want you to use creative and critical thinking. I often tell my students in the classroom, I don't want you to think like me, but I want you to think like me. Use that creative, deep down drilling, that critical way of thinking through things so that you get to the truth for yourself. I'm not perfect. You don't have to believe everything I say. But let's talk about cultural shift. So I like to break down things into definitions because in higher ed in particular, we hear so many words, we hear so many phrases, and everyone's like, oh yeah, that sounds good, cultural shift, yeah, say that. We don't know what we're talking about half the time. We all have these acronyms, we're in this alphabet soup mode. So let's just talk about what everything means. So let's look at cultural, the related traditions and policies. It's kind of what we've all sat around and said, this is who we are. And our mission is a really great example of that, and I'm so glad you have a copy in front of you to refer to. And then shift, we're talking about a movement. We're talking about an adjustment. So we're talking about an agreed set of behaviors or traditions within our community, but then we're talking about moving that somewhere. So again, we're not leaving it behind. We're taking this mission, we're throwing it on our backs, but we're going to be innovative, we're moving forward. And how do we keep those things coinciding? So that's really the deep down here on the cultural shift. So if you put the two words together, this is what we get. Suddenly seeming changes within a culture to a culture. So, I mean, it can be the subculture, it can be the small groups. Even if we look at this room has its culture, but then each table is going to have their own kind of conversations and reflections. How do we keep moving and morphing within that space together? And how do we keep hearing each other? But we'll get to that. We are literally on the on-ramp or the off-ramp for this exit. This is happening. It is a thing that is going on. And it's nothing that we're going to be able to stop at this point. We might want Sister Carol to stay, but she's got visions of relaxing, and I don't blame her. So things are going to change. We don't have a choice, right? And then if we look at the news, I feel like every time I look at the news, I'm annoyed and or learn something else. How can it change so much? Like social media is driving the news more than the news drives the news at this point. So there's just constant changes. If you're a social media addict like me, a pop culture addict like me, I'm flipping on looking at Twitter like 50 times a day. And I'm like, how? 10 minutes ago it was this, now it's that. What is happening? It's that consistent change that kind of makes us feel a little queasy. Like on a roller coaster, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're sideways, you're behind yourself, you don't know what's going on, you're gonna throw up, your hair's caught in the thing, you're not sure what's happening. It's literally life. That's what we've been living. So how do we manage it? When we start looking at these things and we start looking at our mission, I again get caught up in what words mean. Now, I came at the tail end of the mission statement writing. So basically the words were decided. I think the one word I had an impact on was the word animate or animating. And I was like, yay, I did a thing. I was literally here for like maybe 2 to 3 weeks, but I was like, yes, I did that. So what does the rest of it mean? Just being fair or reasonable, and then relationships, that state of being connected. You have hundreds of relationships in your life. I'm not just talking about the people that you love or your partner or your spouse. I'm talking about with your mechanic, your dentist, the guy who packs your groceries. These are temporary relationships. Sometimes they're longer than that, but you have relationships with everyone. So what keeps that space fair? But who decides what fair even means? And during the inauguration, I thought of this because Amanda Gorman said, and the norms and the notions of what just is isn't always justice. Because the same people with the same purviews aren't always making the decisions that everyone has to live with. So really thinking through what justice means and how we can make a just society and have just relationships is a really big deal. I believe that everyone has to be heard, no matter what. So how do we get there? Because if you feel heard, you're like I said, with that one word. I had an impact on one word, and I was like, yes, I did a thing. I really didn't. It was already kind of decided. I was just like, me too. Yay, I feel like I did something. But how do we make everyone feel that way? How do we make everyone feel like they've had an impact and like they matter and like you've heard them and they've heard you and there's a decision on the table and you said, you know what, I did a thing. I was involved. And I feel like this is really part of that. We can't just have one person or one segment of our population holding that bag. It's got to be shared. So when you look at a just relationship, it's going to deal with a formed connection. And we're talking about people who are digging in. I may be on leadership, but I like getting my hands as dirty as everyone else. We all have stake in this. When we're all shining, we all have that work. We all can look and see we did a thing. And then we've done something marvelous, but we have to share that within the community. So this is my idea on a just relationship and what I feel like that means. Then we talk about inclusive community and what that really means. That sharing, okay, that effort. It's making sure that we're equitable, that we're giving everyone the same chance. But that doesn't mean giving everyone the same thing. That's equality, and that doesn't work that well. It's got to be equitable. So let's think through it. If we think something is fantastic, but this segment of the population is left out, then it might not be equitable. So what can we do? And if we can't do something, how can we make it a little bit better? What can we talk about? It's leaving your minds and your ears open. I'm not saying that every single thing can be resolved, but every single thing can be discussed. And that hearing each other, that's where inclusion and an inclusive community comes in. So it's engaging every member in that decision making. All voices are respected. Okay? It's working collectively. The same way we said to our students, when you get out of here, your GPA is cumulative. It's a connection, it's a combination of everything that you've done here. It's the same thing with our works, our actions and reactions. It is cumulative. If someone from our community decides to separate and leave, it's been a collection of actions, events, and incidences that made them say, this isn't right for me anymore. And we need to dig into why that is too, because it's important. Because we are a community. I like Star Wars. Now, if you have not seen the Book of Boba Fett, and if you care about seeing the Book of Boba Fett, I'm going to ruin the last episode right now. I'm very sorry. Did you see it already? Just get out of here, man. Just run. Just run. La, 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 la. Don't listen to me for like the next 5 minutes. So, in the Book of Boba Fett, okay, this little guy right here, his name is Grogu, and I'm obsessed. I have one in my office. I love this character so much. He looks like a little innocent baby, but he's actually about 50, 60 years old because his species lives to be in their 900s. Why Grogu is important and why I'm using him. Grogu actually had I'm not going to spoil everything. If you've never seen it, it's great fun. Get in there. Disney Plus is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Grogu has a traumatic incident, and because of that traumatic incident, he forgets his own power. He doesn't really remember who he is. And in that, he gets saved by a character called the Mandalorian, who's a bounty hunter, really. The Mando is there to, like, do stuff. He does more than just a thing, okay? He shows up, there's going to be some stuff. So he shows up, he finds Grogu, and he's like, oh, this poor little creature. I can't let people hurt him. So he takes him along with him, and they form a bond. But during that time, Mando realizes, I don't know if I'm the best one to do your professional development, Grogu. You might belong elsewhere. He finds other Jedi, and Grogu actually starts getting trained with like the Jedi, Luke Skywalker. Even if you don't know who Star Wars You know that name. So he's training with Luke, and Luke says, I don't know if Grogu's heart is really in this. I don't think this is the community for Grogu. And then he gives Grogu a choice. You can pick this or you can pick that. And you can decide where you think you're going to be. Now, here's the thing. The Jedi work on having no attachments. So the community is strong. They're committed to their mission, but they are not attached to each other or anyone else. The overall goal is goodness in the galaxy. The Mandalorians are completely attached to their culture and to each other. They will fight as individuals, whether they know each other's name. Their thing is, this is the way. That's their motto. They stick hard to their culture and their ideals. In many ways, we could be either Jedi or the Mandalorians, but this is why I think we're more Mandalorian. When Grogu is given a choice, he chooses to go with the Mandalorian because he can be his authentic self. He doesn't have to give up attachments. He doesn't have to leave anything behind. He doesn't have to not joke. He steals frogs and eats eggs very often. He doesn't have to not do those things. Grogu can be himself. That's why he chooses to go with the Mandalorian, even though he could be a Jedi. And that doesn't mean he doesn't still have his powers and his ways and doesn't understand those teachings. But in his heart, he wants to be where he can be unique. And I think that's the key to inclusion and just relationships and cultural shifts. It's being unique. It's knowing that you can be accepted in the form that you showed up in. And that's what I want. I don't want anyone to be anything other than who they are day in and day out. And I want you to come to this community and feel like, you know what, I'm me when I get there. Whatever that means. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone. It doesn't mean you have to be just like anybody else. Be yourself and let everyone else just respect who that is. It's very simple, but yet these are the things that get society caught up. So how is this sustainable? How is cultivating all this sustainable? It's taking our time. Actually, Jackie reminded me of a quote that I have. It's fall with grace and assist with patience. And it's a lot of that. Okay, it's not going to be perfect every day. It's taking a step away, taking a deep breath, and coming back. So this is how we keep it sustainable. Anne Frank, in her book, she says, "Let me be myself." And at that time, she said, when she said it, it was let me be myself as a young girl, as someone who wants to explore her sexuality, as someone who's hungry for knowledge, someone who wants to be a writer, someone who loves the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, someone who just wants to be Jewish and be free. She meant it in every sense of the word. Let me be myself. And I feel like when we don't do that, we literally lock ourselves away. We hurt each other. And then we're not an inclusive community anymore. We're not having just relationships anymore. We're having just a hot mess. And I'm not here for that. So as we go through and we start to move towards what will be the reflection part of this, I want you to think about this question. Are we cultivating belonging, or are we finding status quo bias? And I was I'm a huge audiobook fan also. I probably listen somewhere around 5 to 6 books a month. If you listen anytime you have quiet space or you're alone, you find you can get a lot of reading done. Technically, my English professor's in here. Technically get a lot of reading done. So I was reading the book Inclusify, and listening to the book Inclusify. And she brought up status quo bias, and she started talking about it, and I was in the car, and I'm like, not safe, not safe. I'm pausing, and I'm like rewinding. I'm like, wait, I need to hear that again, because I've been thinking about this, but I didn't realize someone else thought about it. And you're not a scholar unless you think about something someone else already thought about. That's when you know you're a scholar. I'm like, I did a thing, once again. So listening to status quo bias, it's that idea of, well, this is the way we've been doing it, and if we shift it, yikes, okay? And that can pertain to so many things, especially at a mission-driven institution. Now, remember when I said in the beginning of this, we are not leaving our mission behind. We slung that thing on our backs, and we're going another 100,000 miles, okay? We're not leaving it behind. However, a lot of the people in this room are new to this organization. They have to find out how that mission lives and breathes for them. They have to realize how they're going to integrate with the rest of us. And we have to say, Interesting concept. I never thought of it that way before. Let me take a minute. When we say, that's not what we do. That's not true to our mission. That's not who we are. That's not going to work. Let's just stop right there. Let's not get too excited. When we start saying things like that, we're closing out the possibility for new ideas. We're shutting down inclusion. There's no way we're going to have a relationship, just or otherwise, because we're not making people feel welcomed. So it's very important to me that we look at status quo bias and we think about it. And this last line here, we miss each other and we miss an inclusive life. And I can't think of anything more sad than that. After being here with a year and meeting all of you, I started to realize the other day, there are elements that I really get excited about coming to work because I get to see people I really like. I get to talk to them about all these ideas. And I find myself sometimes in conversation for an hour or more just about new ideas, just things we could do. Imagine all of that lost if we're not being inclusive and if we're stuck in status quo bias. And if we don't practice this, a sense of belonging. This is why I keep saying we've slung that mission on our back, because it's intrinsic to who this institution is and to who we are as individuals in this institution. That sense of belonging, that feeling for affinity, that feeling of pride in the mission and the foundations of a group or a place, man, we live that all day. But we just have to be careful that we don't live it through the lens of this is what we are doing versus this is what we can do. That word innovation is in there for a reason. Innovation, innovative, it's conjugated, it's in there, okay? And it's feeling that movement and that ownership. You know, I'm very quickly got to the place when, as I was walking around, if I saw something that didn't quite look right, I was straightening up something or moving something or like, oh, that looks like garbage, we'll just throw that away. Because I have ownership, I care. I work in this castle all day. I want it to look its best, I want us to be our best. So I just think it's important for us to understand that as we go forward. All right, here's your first reflection question, and we have a nice amount of time, I think. Take a good 5 minutes or so, talk about this at your table. Is there a difference between fitting in and belonging? All right, next question. What's one challenge you foresee in joining this community, and how might you conquer it? And some of you have been here for some time. So what's the challenge that you see? You can think of it overall, like what's this one thing that we just have to come to see eye to eye on? How are we gonna make this work? So again, take like maybe 3 minutes this time, talk amongst your groups, and then we'll report out. All right. Let's keep it moving. So we only have a couple minutes left. Actually, I'm gonna skip this one and go to the next question. What will you do to cultivate belonging? So, you know, again, we talked about our mission, sounds good, but what you fitting to do about it? What are you really going to do? So take a good 3 minutes, talk through this, and then we'll report out again. Okay. I have one more question. And this one, since we're kind of hitting right at 3 o'clock, think about this and you can share it for those of us that are going to stick around. I'm going to stick around if you'd like to talk and share it. Or just think about it as you're heading back to your next meeting or to class or whatever you've got going next. What are you taking away from all this? We do these presentations, you know, I stand up here and I'm all important up at the front with a microphone, but that's not the most important part. It's what are you taking away from this and how are you going to use what we talked about in your everyday life here as a professional, in your personal life even. How are you going to use this? So like I said, I'll stick around if people want to chat a little bit more about this. I'm so glad that you were here. I'm honored that Jackie asked me again and again to come back and speak. I appreciate that because my voice is not the only one here. You know, everyone's matters. So thank you so much. Appreciate everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day. I'm here though, so talk more if you want. Of course.